Hi, I'm Nancy A. Shenker. Welcome to the first episode of my first ever podcast, The Geezerproofer. So by day, I work as a brand marketer, a writer, and a speaker. And I have two companies, the OnSwitch Marketing and Do New Ventures. So this is really new to me. And I am the Geezerproofer. Whenever I say that, I feel like I'm saying I am Spartacus, and you have to be of a certain age to understand the reference. And if not, just Google it. So thanks for joining me on this first episode and on this journey. I'm going to tell you a few things today. I'm going to start out by defining what a geezer is and what a beezer is. I'm going to give you a little bit of background on why I'm doing this podcast. And then I'm going to share with you the good, the bad, the ugly, and sometimes funny stages of my life. That's the really juicy part. And I'm also going to tease what's coming up in the months and the years ahead for this podcast. So let's start with a definition. I got a lot of flack when I was naming this podcast because people think that a geezer could be pejorative or insulting, but a geezer is the opposite of a beezer. What's a beezer? A beezer is someone who knows how to be in the moment, and they think about the future, they remain relevant, they remain active, they remain connected, they remain curious. And geezers are people who are stuck, and that can happen at any age, from 20s up to hundreds. They're fearful of making change. They sometimes lose their skills. They struggle with what to do next in their lives. So you want to be a beezer and not a geezer, no matter how old you are. And the purpose of this podcast is to help you become and remain a beezer and to geezer-proof your life. No matter how old you are now, the reality is we're all going to age. So I'm really focusing more on positive living, longevity, and how to be a badass after 50 or at any age for that matter. So I'm going to be going live with my podcast on October 7th, which is a Saturday. Why October 7th, even though I've been told it's not a great day to launch a podcast? But it is Ageism Awareness Day. And like it or not, we are a youthified society, and there's a lot of bias against older people. And I'm hoping to change that. We need to change the conversation about what it means to be old. The whole phrase anti-aging is kind of ridiculous because if you're not aging, then you're dead. And we're all going to age. Everybody poops, everybody ages. So no matter if you're in your teens or your 20s or your 30s or like me in your 60s, it's really, really important to think about the future as opposed to dwelling on the past. I want to focus, as I said, on longevity, on action, on fun, on relevance, and not even use the A word as often as people use it because it's not something to be feared. It's something to be embraced. So let's answer the basic question. Why am I even launching a podcast? I was so resistant for so long. Podcasts were originally launched in 2004, and here it is, 2023, and I'm just getting started. Well, why now? The short answer is Brian Howie told me to. Brian Howie has been podcasting for almost a decade. He's the founder of Pod Populi, which is my recording studio, and he really enlightened me about the power of podcasts, even in this day and age. There are 500 million people who still listen to podcasts. That's roughly a quarter of the population that's using the internet. So that's a pretty big number. And I chose to do a video podcast, although some of my podcasts will be audio only. Why am I doing this one all by myself? I don't have any guests. But I really wanted to get comfortable with the whole notion of podcasting. I want to get used to using my mic. I want to get used to using headphones. I want to allow myself some time to line up the best possible guests. So you'll be seeing me next time with some really, really incredible, funny, irreverent guests. And today, I also want to give you a little bit of background about me, not in a really self-serving, narcissistic way, but just a glimpse into who I am and how this all came about. So I am 67 years old, which means that I have, if I'm lucky and I take good care of myself, another 33 years minimum of life. My mother lived to 95, my grandmother lived to 99, so the odds are pretty good that I'll live to see 100. And here's a great statistic. In 1990, there were only about 95,000 people who were age 100 or older. By 2050, that number is going to be close to 4 million. And I'm really determined to be part of that 4 million club. All right, so first I'm going to tell you a little bit about my personal story. Not to be narcissistic and navel-gazing, but really to give you some perspective on who I am and what I'm all about. People who know me now think that I'm usually pretty upbeat, fun, funny. As my brother sometimes says, I take tragic things and I tie them up in a neat and tidy red bow, which is probably kind of true because I have had my share of pain and suffering throughout my life. I lost both my parents and my younger brother. Over the years, I've lost body parts. I lost my uterus and 2/3 of my right lung, and I broke bones. I've been told that I'm too old to return to corporate life, not that I really would like to. During the recession, my business, which I launched at 48, blew up, and I lost a ton of money and a lot of pride. And then I went through a divorce. So yeah, I've had a lot of bad shit happen, and I'm not telling you that to throw a little pity party for myself. I'm telling you because part of aging involves resilience, healing, learning how to face adversity and pick yourself up, put your big girl or big boy pants on, and keep on going. And as we get older, we continue to get hit with challenges. And the key thing is to just bounce back and come out swinging. Again, mourn, heal, do the work, but then remember that we have a lot of years ahead. So now let me just look back in the rearview mirror for a few minutes. And I don't spend a lot of time dwelling on the past, but the past does inform the present and the future. So I like to break my life down into decade-long installments. 0 to 10, I was the shy, chubby, geeky, weird girl, very insecure, very shy, afraid to raise my hand in class, and just lived a lot of that time in insecurity and mild terror. But then when I got to my teen years, I hit my stride. Your teens are about having fun, looking to move on to the next phase, which in my case was college. And then 20s, once you graduate, and especially being a woman of the 80s, the focus was on building a career, finding a man, and settling down, which I did all of those things in my 20s. In my 30s, I was very focused on building that career. It was the go-go greedy 80s. I wore big shoulder pads, floppy bow ties. I had 2 kids, lived in the burbs, was living the dream for people in the 80s. But then in my 40s, I started reevaluating. And in the words of David Byrne, how did I get here? This is not my beautiful life. I was an English and psychology major. I was wildly creative. And there I was working for a bank, having a lot of people working for me. I did make a move to a different industry, but that really wasn't feeding my soul. So I became a founder at the age of 48, which had its own stresses and strains. The 50s were growing years, mistake years, learning years, as I was still figuring out who and what I wanted to be when I grew up, which now I realize there is no such thing. In my early 60s, I moved to Arizona. And as I said a little bit earlier, I discovered that I was unemployable. Again, not that I wanted to move back to corporate life, but a lot of companies in my industry, which is marketing, were hiring mostly young people. And so that was a little bit traumatic. And I really had to move and groove and maneuver to find my place in the world. And my business is now flourishing because I never really gave up hope. The move to Arizona was huge. My mother was aging and she was sick. And so I had to deal with that, as many of us are going to need to do as our parents get older. So now here I am in my late 60s, 67 to be exact, and I am thinking, let's get this party started. My kids are grown and flown. They're awesome. Both my parents, sadly, are gone, but I no longer have caretaking responsibility. And I have the wisdom and the freedom and the perspective to really move on to that next stage of my life. And something that's also really important to me, and I always counsel people who are feeling lost in their 60s, is to get very involved in volunteerism. Either get on a board, give back to your community, tutor in a school, anything that will help you have that sense of self-worth and also help other people. So one of my favorite television scenes of all time was the season finale of 6 Feet Under. Not because the show was about death and dying, because that's pretty effing depressing, but one of the lead characters, who's a photographer, is lying in bed. She's 102 years old or something like that. She's dying, and she looks at her wall across from her deathbed, and it's all of those Polaroid moments. Now I'm dating myself. All of those snippets. Today it would be your reels, your Insta photos, all of those happy moments of her life. And when I have trouble falling asleep at night, I will sometimes go through that fast forward view of where I've been. And then more importantly than that, look to the future and say, okay, whether the topic is relationships or friendship, or in my case, writing and reading, what am I going to be doing for the next 33 years that leverages my passion and fuels my soul? So enough about me. Let's talk about this podcast and some of the guests I'm going to have on. It's going to be more about fun, resilience, looking forward, helpful tips, rather than aging per se. Of course, I am going to talk about things that relate to aging, but usually with a positive, upbeat lens. The podcasts are going to be short. They're going to be funny. They're going to be irreverent. Sometimes they'll be unfiltered. So if you shock easily, this probably is not the right podcast for you. And we're going to cover 3 main categories. We're going to cover sex and relationships. Here's another fun fact or not so fun fact. The divorce rate among people 50 and older is the highest it's ever been in history. The term gray divorce is in a lot of the media. And because marriage was an institution that was invented when lifespans were about 35, it may be time to reevaluate the whole definition of relationships. So sex, relationships, dating, nothing is off limits. The next topic we're going to cover is technology. We've all read about AI, or hopefully you have by now, ChatGPT. A lot of people who are older, who grew up in the analog era, are fearful of technology, but technology is going to enable us to live longer, more productive lives. I mentioned earlier that I was missing some body parts. If I live to 120, which is currently my number, I suspect I'm going to have more artificial parts than original parts, like a classic car, and that's okay, because that's where technology is going to help us age more actively, age better, and age longer. And then last but not least is a very broad category, which is lifestyle. What to wear, how to get ready to go out on those dates, where to travel to find other people who are like-minded and are beezers rather than geezers. So lifestyle is a very broad category, and I welcome any topic that you, my listeners, have in mind to cover in that category. So it's not all about me. And I wouldn't be here and I wouldn't be having this podcast if not for so many people in my lives who helped me get to where I am. Now, this is sort of sounding weirdly like a Miss America speech, but I'm all about gratitude. And some of the people that I'm most grateful for are my late mother and father, who really helped me to find my voice, to become more fearless, and to realize that I could do whatever I wanted to do in my life. My Nana Molly was the original badass over 50. She lived to 99, and she used to say that if she was a couple of years younger, she would buy a motorcycle. She was married 3 times and went down kicking when she finally left the planet. My dear friend from college, Howard Bragman, sadly passed away way too young. but he was a PR person extraordinaire, and he was always my biggest cheerleader in terms of helping me realize that when I wanted to get on the speaking circuit and get out there and get over that shy, weird, fat girl thing, he was always a huge supporter. And last but not least, my daughters, who keep me accountable, who always steer me in the right direction and give me a really great intergenerational perspective. And there's a huge community that's been super supportive on LinkedIn, and they probably will be some of my guests. But the anti-ageism activists, there are too many to name, but they're great people, like-minded people who are helping change the conversation around aging. So listen to me on Spotify, Apple, wherever else you get your podcasts. Please, please, please follow me on Instagram or LinkedIn. There's lots of other content there, written content, not video content or podcast content, but a lot of it does relate to aging. And if you want to be a guest, I would love to have you. Just please email me at, and I'm going to spell this out, it's NuNuVentures1956, NuNU Ventures 1956, all lowercase, at gmail.com. And again, please follow me on social media, and thank you for listening. Hopefully you made it to the end. See you soon. I'd love to help you, my listeners, geezer-proof your lives. Peace out.